I want the truth and nothing but the truth.
What's up, everybody? It's your lawyer, Jobber Godot, and today I brought a friend with me today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
What's up, guys? Broken Ronin here. Happy to join you on the channel. Talk about some JJK and Jojo. So happy to be here.
Yep, I have to bring the JJK expert onto this channel. We're just gonna be having a nice little fun discussion about like stands versus cursed energy, right? Because I think it's a pretty interesting topic. Nothing like a versus matchup, like, oh my goodness, like it's an all free for all battle, like who's gonna win this whole death battle? No. We're just gonna be talking about like what they are, right, and what their uses are, which is better, like the positives, negatives, that type of stuff, you know?
Yeah, just gonna be kind of comparing them, seeing what their similarities are, things like that.
Yeah, and I figured it'd be hella fun, you know, because we already got the JoJo Batch 2 out. Plus, you know, JJK Season 2 is gonna be coming out at least pretty soon. Plus, people can read the manga, right? So that's also dope.
Yep. And the movie just came out recently, at least as the time of recording this video. So it's all lining up.
True. Also, bro, Gojo's racist. He was beating a black.
bro, he was going crazy.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god. But yeah, make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. Really helps at the channel a lot. Anyways, let's just get right into this, right? So I'll go first with like explaining what stands are essentially, right? So at least stands in like the JoJo series are just basically a manifestation of your like fighting spirit, right? You can just control it with like mentally, right? So it's also like mental energy or psychological energy. And they come in like many shapes and sizes, like different, like really crazy ass abilities. Let's say, for example, let's say something minute as, I don't know, turning a grown man into a child, right? Something as like small as that compared to, well, my whole thing is to speed up time to infinity, right? Like of the whole universe. And that's pretty crazy. And Araki usually goes about like trying to quantify like most of these stands through their like stand stats, like, you know, A, B, C, in terms of at least the radiuses, like going alphabetically, like they got strength, speed, all this different types of stuff for like, each stand, right? And I think it's pretty interesting how they quantify that. Some things can't be quantified, like Araki's like, yeah, like I don't know how to math this shit. We still haven't gotten the stand stats of, I don't know, a guy that's literally logic, the concept of it, and a guy that just negs concepts because his attacks are logical. I don't know how he's gonna put that in his stand stats. That's just me.
JoJo's stats sound actually insane to deal with. To compare a bit, for cursed energy, it's very similar in the sense that it's based on like your kind of mental state. However, cursed energy is produced and manipulated by negative emotions and then just controlling and using them in combat. Things like fear, rage, sadness, any sort of emotion that you would correlate with a negative context, those are going to be the things that typically fuel cursed energy. So when a character is overwhelmed with fear or in a near-death situation, we see examples like in chapter 1 where Yuji, who isn't a sorcerer at this point, is able to see a cursed spirit, even though he normally wouldn't be able to. It's because he's dealing with quite a bit of negative emotions there, namely being extreme fear and danger. So he's able to kind of unlock cursed energy or tap in a little bit. Cursed energy and cursed techniques by proxy are almost completely talent based. This much is stated by Gojo in chapter 12, like basically verbatim. If you don't have talent for sorcery, your ceiling is going to generally be lower than a lot of people's. There are fringe examples, characters like Yuji, characters that you'll see later, like Kusakabe, who don't have innate curse techniques yet are able to make a name for themselves within the Jujutsu world. But generally speaking, if you're not talented for it, if you aren't born with some level of skill innately, you're kind of done for. Gojo in fact says that like a sorcerer's skill set is about 80% innate talent, meaning it's a dice roll to see whether or not you're going to be gifted with that. With cursed energy, you can do your typical, your power system stuff. You can enhance your strength, you can enhance your speed, your durability, your senses, things like that. And with cursed techniques, you can kind of get a little crazy. You have things like on the lower end of just being able to swap places with people when you clap your hands, all the way up to being able to divide a finite amount of space an infinite amount of times in order to like be completely untouchable in the verse. So it can get pretty crazy. You have iterations of techniques like extension techniques, maximum techniques. You even have like the pinnacle of sorcery, bring domain expansions, all of which we can cover in some level of depth and moving on. But there's something to be said about how diverse of a power system cursed energy can be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because I watched like at least Jujutsu Kaisen's like first season, and it seems like that's how they explain like a lot of techniques. Like, well, this takes about talent, right? I even seen in the movie like, well, listen, like some people just have talent, some people don't, right? And I remember like what was it? Gojo, he was like telling, I think one of Yuji's friends, like, bro, like listen, like you do have the talent, but you're not gonna like get through this with the power of friendship, right? For this talent, you need to like make a lot of sacrifices, right? No power of friendship bullshit's gonna get you this powerful, right? And I think something similar in JoJo to the talent system in, at least when it comes to JJK. What was it? Yeah, Ronan, wasn't there this one guy, right, that like had some like kind of like gamble, cursed energy, right? Like he could just like
so a character named Hikari has like a domain expansion that is very intricately has to do with gambling. His ability is one of the ones that is on the more complex side. Like you have abilities that are super broken like Gojo's. You have kind of like very basic yet useful abilities like Toto's, which is boogie woogie, swapping places with people. And then you have this other subset of techniques. It's not that many, but you have them where they generally get a bit confusing and convoluted to a lot of people. So you have like, I'll just explain this ability outright, and the level of confusion you feel will probably properly reflect rather how complex these abilities can get. So there's this one character, or two set of characters rather, who have this technique called projection sorcery. And projection sorcery allows you to divide 1 second into 24 frames and predetermine your movements in order to get a speed boost. Now, if that didn't make sense to you, it's okay. Join the club, right? It didn't make sense to a lot of people upon like initially seeing the technique. It's actually something that I think gets explained more and more in-depthly as time goes on and as it's shown more in the series. But techniques like that and techniques that are a little bit more confusing for both the viewer and the actual opponents dealing with it are things that become a little bit more common in JJK. So I don't know how it is with stands. Rather, I don't know how it is with the JoJo's community and their interpretation or understanding of these stands. But it's kind of a meme within JJK and its community that like nobody be understanding what's going on in Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I personally do, because it's like, not only I really like the series, so I reread it and analyze it a lot, but it's also my job. I gotta be knowledgeable. I gotta stay on my A game when it comes to the series. But a lot of people I have seen do have some difficulty when it comes to understanding some of the more complex abilities.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people in those boats, man. Like that guy with the gambling power, I was like, what the fuck am I looking at right here? This looks like a JoJo ability. Crazy shit, right? At least the thing I can compare the talent system in JJK2 is more so about like at least the resolve or even the arrow system. Like for example, with resolve, it just like brings out the highest potential of a stand user that normally wouldn't be possible. Like when a character has resolve, usually fate's on their side, they can just do some crazy things with their abilities, right? For example, like in part 6, like a ridiculous feat, guy has like an ability that just turns the inside out, right? Gravitational energy. And this character, all she can do is it's strings. That's her stand ability. She can turn her body into strings, all that type of shit, right? How does she counter this? And no joke, with resolve, she literally just makes the parts which she got punched at a Mobius strip, which is like a band of infinity. So the energy is just looping around it like infinitely. So it's not like turning her inside out. There is no concept of inside out. And the OP stand user of that gravity ability, like Pucci or with Sea Moon, he's like, whoa, what the fuck, right? But then we've got like stand arrows, where in contrast to JJK, you don't really need, I guess, talent, right, in order for you to get like a supreme power. All you need to be is just chosen, essentially, by just the arrow. So essentially, like, right, for example, Giorno, he was chosen by the arrow, and he just simply got like a pretty damn strong stand, right? And for example, Kira, he was chosen by the arrow and got a stand evolution, right? Killer Queen bites to does. So some things just don't take talent. You just can just get it. And most people in the verse can simply just get nicked by one of the Requiem mirrors and get a Requiem stand just like that. No skill really needed. Or maybe if we were to talk more about like skill, like okay, well, what's more like skillful? And I think we should delve into the Part 7 territory, like for example the golden rotation techniques, right? Where essentially, for example, Johnny throughout all of Part 7, he has a stand that goes through an evolution, right? Which he has to learn more and more about his stand, and also like grow as a person to unlock these new inherent abilities like his skill, right? And like practicing just having a really good knowledge of like the concept of the golden ratio until he finally gets one of the best stands in the series, right? Like Tesseract 4. So those are like examples to bring about.
Got you. Yeah, that's definitely something. I think that's a similar point for both stands and Cursed Energy, that regardless of your talent, it does require specific input from the user in order to use it properly. Like you mentioned earlier, with Gojo talking to Megami, yeah, he's very talented. Somebody that we later learn has like talent to surpass some of like the top tier characters in the verse. But because of his mindset at the time, he's not able to use that talent properly. He's too focused on not losing rather than winning. And once that mindset somewhat switches, once he kind of understands he needs to change that and be a bit more selfish in the way he lives his life, he's able to unlock an ability that, you know, a somewhat a semi-domain expansion, if you will. One of the most broken and like high tier abilities that a Jujutsu sorcerer or Curse Spirit can actually achieve in the verse. So I would say that like even though a lot of it is talent based, it's talent based plus you being able to utilize that talent and nurture it properly.
Yeah, and I could definitely get behind that, right? And in terms of, let's say, comparing like fights, how fights usually go between, let's say, stand users versus stand users and cursed energy users versus like cursed energy users, it's at least on the stand side, I can at least say that these battles do get pretty intricate. It relies more so like on outsmarting the opponent, like because the opponent usually has like a really weird or crazy ability. For example, let's just say Part 6, right? Let's just go with some more recent. For example, Jolene, her ability is incredibly simple. Once again, strings, right? And she goes up against people with better abilities than her, right? And it's relying on her own ingenuity to use her ability to like the fullest potential, essentially, against these other types of like users with at least very unique abilities. Like, what are you gonna really do against a person that can just, I guess, erase your memories? You can only remember up to 3 things or something, right? How do you beat that, right? And
yeah,
how she beats this, and though it is with a little bit of help, but it's still a crazy feat, is that she literally looked at like a binary code of what the person looked like. She used her strings to trace it, and then she put it in front of her, like, oh, that's the enemy. I mean, I can remember things, but I'm always gonna remember that's what you look like, and then she just beats the fuck out of her. I'm like, what? That's crazy. Like, dang.
Yeah. That's pretty smart. I will say that it seemed to be a lot of things similar in the way that it goes about it, because some fights in JJK do come down to just like pure matches of power and like slugging matches and just I can hit harder than you and you know I'm faster and stronger and things like that. And so certain fights do definitely come down to that. But then you definitely have a lot like more complex strategies of you have to analyze their ability. It's like this person has like inverse. There's a character in the series that is an inverse technique, meaning basically. Like if you hit them at a certain level, like really hard punches don't hurt, really soft attacks do hurt, right? But that's not an ability, that's not a technique he divulges immediately. And you actually have to have some of the series figure that out, and while not letting the character know, right, that they figured out his abilities, they have to mix in these super heavy blows that don't do anything with these like off guard super light ones that catch him off guard and like start doing real damage to him. And the way in which the characters go about figuring that out is actually pretty interesting. But that does kind of contain some spoilers. I'll be just vague with that one, just to illustrate the fact that strategy is something very common in both JoJo's and Jujutsu Kaisen battles, it seems. One thing I did want to bring up, because we've been talking about a lot of similarities, is the difference in like potential power or like scope that these abilities do have. And I'll touch on Cursed Energy real quick, because on the high end you have abilities like Gojo's, which is basically manipulation of space and time to a certain degree. He's able to take finite amounts of space and divide it into infinite parts rather, in order to basically become untouchable. He's able to like reverse this imaginary concept of infinity in order to like shoot these powerfully concentrated blasts at people. What Gojo says actually in the manga at some point is one of his abilities of infinity allows like impossibilities to happen, like creating -1 apples or something like that, like bringing impossibilities into existence. It gets pretty wild, like when you look into some of the intricacies of like what Gojo's ability actually does for the verse. And then there's a large range of things. Also in the higher end, you have a character whose curse technique is literally to bring things into reality that they think are funny, right? If they think
What?
it's funny, they can make it happen. Like that is one of the abilities established and shown in the series. We haven't seen it pulled up to its fullest extent because this character has been rather recently introduced and hasn't had that many fights. But the narrator literally says when he comes up with something that he's certain will be funny, it becomes reality. That's the technique.
That's just crazy. What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Most techniques are not like that, but you do have some like pretty broken techniques here or there that get into that somewhat high tier of hacks.
Yeah, that is a pretty wild ability. Just like, oh, that's that's pretty funny, and then just appears. Like, I guess if an enemy like dying, oh, that's pretty funny, and it just happens. Like, what the? That's pretty insane to really think about in terms of ability. And of course, you've already went over Gojo's like infinity ability, how like busted that is, and I think it's definitely time to go over like at least the higher tier like stands of like JoJo, right, in terms of like their highest potential. And I've already talked about like GER, right? Like, okay, that's a pretty strong stand. Like, he just reverts things to zero, right? Like, space-time manipulation going on there. And the true crazy stuff we get into like later in the parts, for example, you know what? Part 8. I'm gonna go super crazy on it real quick, okay? Like, part 8, we've got like the most OP villain stand ever, Wonder Review. Like, even the author Rocky was like, yo, this guy's like busted. He's literally the most powerful villain I've ever created. And I purposely made it that way, right? Where he's just literally logic, like the concept of logic. I don't know how to put it. He's like a stand, but like a hybrid of a human, but also it's a really weird shit going on here. And
it sounds like it.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? There's like no stand stats on this guy. It's just like, well, I mean, how would you quantify that? Like, stand stats are meant to quantify things, right? But it's like, Araki hasn't released any stand stats to this guy, so he most likely doesn't have it. Plus, he has like the same GER statements of, oh, he doesn't have stats or whatever, right? But, or at least in the area of like, oh, he surpasses all like stands, like you can't touch him, right? Like, no matter what stand you have, you'll never be able to go beyond logic and reason. But there's this other stand, right? And like, because you guys are wondering, how does this guy get beat, right? JJK fans, that's what you're wondering, right? And I'm not even joking. Literally in that same arc, the main character, like through a stand evolution, gains the ability to shoot illogical like bubble bullets. I'm not joking. Like, no one could perceive it. They're like, wait, what the fuck? And then it was just super wild. He literally eradicated a concept. He just killed his ass. I was like, what? Huh. So the things can get pretty wild. But now I know another thing interesting. Well, what about the scope, right? You just told me, like, okay, that's pretty crazy. This guy's logic. You need that logical thing. What's the quantification, right? And I've like, kind of like already like quantified that a bit, like on my channel and also on Meta's channel. Yeah, yo, go plug him in. Go subscribe to it too. But like, yeah, like it just like essentially, if one review is like more powerful than D4C Love Train, that shit was like, it was not to mention, it was like powered by the corpse parts of, I'm not even joking, Jesus Christ. Bear with me. And this is like a multiversal plus like conceptual barrier, right? That like no one can really get through except for Tussac 4. And then later on, of course, Araki says, yo, Wonder Review's more powerful than that guy, right? And we see in the part, right, that Wonder Review's like abilities negs the whole corpse parts that powered that train. And also Johnny's Tussac 4 that negated the train, right? So I was like, damn, it's pretty powerful, right? So at least we can have a scope of range, like, okay, things are like getting way higher, right? And then we're probably wondering, like, where does Gojo like fit into like all of this, right? If Gojo were in JoJo, like, how high would he be? Like, in terms of like, okay, like, is he bringing the smoke, right, with his ability? Like, how unique is it? And unfortunately, right, I personally, this is my personal opinion, he'd kind of just be like one of those, I guess, side villains, kind of like, for example, in part 6 where like, you know, Poochie would just send goons towards Jolene and like friends, right? For example, Gojo's ability, which is like infinity, right? Which is like basically the closer you get to him, like I guess the distance keeps getting divided by, you'll never reach him, right? It's infinite. I'm not even joking. Literally, there's already an enemy stand that does the exact same thing as Gojo in part 6, and they've already dealt with that, right? Where it's the green baby. Well, it does everything Gojo does, but the only difference is that it just makes you smaller infinitely. You'll never reach the baby, right? Like, cause it's just gonna keep dividing the distance, exactly like how like Gojo's infinity works, right? So, and they've already dealt with that type of concept. So it is pretty wild to think that Gojo would kind of just be one of like a side villain or like a goon, and like Jojo in terms of enemy stand user wise. So, yeah.
Hacks wise, it's honestly like JoJo's gets pretty ridiculous. I'm not a JoJo scaler by any means, but just some of the things I watch, I'm like, oh, I bet people are using that in the versus battle to be real nasty scaling for real. Like, JoJo's gets crazy. JoJo's get crazy. Like, cursed energy and cursed techniques definitely do have like quite a bit of hacks, but JoJo's, I think, is one of those series that sort of builds itself upon those hacks and has been doing so for so many decades that it's just going to be hard for like a relatively new series to even compare to the sheer amount of abilities that show up in the first place. So like on a purely hack standpoint in terms of the variety and the scope or just the scale at which these hacks work, yeah, I would say Cursed Energy is getting beat out by JoJo's. For all those curious, I don't know if I would necessarily go to say that makes stands better inherently, because all that means is just like there's a larger scope. But I would say that if you're looking for hacks that can get you some solid wins in your next versus battle debate, then yeah, I'd say go with JoJo's over Jujutsu Kaisen every day.
Because generally I do think the cursed energy system is vastly like just interesting. Like, wow, like when I was looking at how the series is presented, for example, what was that guy called? Like Toto, he had Boogie Woogie,
yep,
some shit like that. I was like, what? He was clapping his hands, like teleporting and shit. Or the Black Flash, where like I don't know, Yuji's like in some intense concentration, right? And he hits you like with I think 0. Like I don't know, something of a second or some shit, something wild, right? Like, and he just distorts reality. I'm like, okay, that's really interesting. In terms of the abilities getting more and more like OP in JJK, because usually, like, at least in JoJo, right, every stand, for example, let's say villain-wise, right? Villain-wise, each villain throughout, like, each part gets vastly more, like, stronger in terms of, like, ability, right, compared to the last villain, right? For example, part 3, we had a guy that stops time. Part 4, we had a guy that just blows up time and, like, you know, takes you back, right? Groundhog Day. Part 5, guy that erases time. Part, like, 6, guy that accelerates time to infinity, right? And then part 7 to 8, we just get into some conceptual shit, right? Like, on, like, a multiversal plus scale. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. That is what time and creativity will get you hacks wise.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah, because Gojo is usually the head honcho of like JJK is the strongest, so usually like we either have characters that are just like right below him, like, oh, you could beat him. Like, I mean, like for example, that guy that just imagines things are like funny. Like, what? Yeah, it would be funny if if the Gojo guy, the strongest guy, just died and just like maybe I don't know JJK.
Yeah. Honestly, that's been one of the memes going on. It's like, wouldn't it be funny if Gojo just? Then it's funny you say that because the narrator literally does bring up that it's a technique that has the ability to oppose Gojo in theory.
Like, yeah, it's like, would it be funny if his infinity stopped working?
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Or the other guy with the gambling thing is like, well, like, I'm just like really lucky, right? And that's why I was able to, I guess, hit you, Gojo, even though your infinity's up. Like, it's something weird like that. I'm like,
I was just gonna say, abilities seem to be getting like more and more complex and like hacks based. Even though it was already initially pretty hacks based when you had like characters like Gojo, but going into the culling games, we're probably gonna see a lot more complexities and abilities. Things like domain expansions, other extensions of the cursed energy power system as a whole.
Yeah. I kind of do wonder though. So the origins of cursed energy compared to the origins of stands is definitely pretty weird because we have like two different like histories of like stands origins. I don't know about like cursed energy though.
Yeah, so cursed energy's origin is it's not something that we know. Like if we know who is the first person to discover it, like in what scenario was it discovered? Like we don't quite have that yet. It's probably something, I would say it's something we might see later on in the series. But the origin of it definitely is not something like we are aware of just yet.
Okay. That is really interesting. I'm really surprised they didn't explain that yet. But I mean, sure. I mean, we're probably gonna get something pretty like crazy like down the line. I bet, like in JJK history. I just know it. I'd absolutely know it. But what was it? I think with the origin of stands. Ironically, stands aren't even really natural, if that makes sense to the JoJo verse. At least, let's say in the like first universe, like the Part 1-6 universe, like JoJo stands, like basically Araki pulled like a Spider-Man. This shit came from space, bro, like Venom. Like it was a meteorite crashed down and like it was affecting people, killing people, right? And you just needed to have like the will to like have a stand, right, in order to survive, right? And stand uses came about from some sort of alien rock, right? They carved into arrows, right? Some virus, essentially. Maybe some X-Men type shit. Who knows? But the second origin of stands in the new universe, once again, we have to go back to the Bible, Christian fans, but Jesus, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna leave this cave. And after that, after like as soon as he died, like way later on, after he like pretty much traveled around the whole globe, essentially the whole planet like went into like a huge a global like kind of like a, I don't know, nature like disaster thing where like there's a ton of earthquakes like just destroying the world, all this type of shit, like forming into something new. And his corpse parts were just spread around the United States of America. And this also created the Devil's Palm, which is, I guess, the arrow version of like the Part 1-6 verse, where if you go into the Devil's Palm, or actually even like let's say later on the Walleyes, right, you will just like get a stand, right, just because you were just there, essentially just existing. And especially if you also get like, for example, one of Jesus Christ's corpse parts, you definitely get a stand, right? So there's like two different-ish origins to the like stands, right? Because they're technically at least not natural, especially like in the Part 1-6 verse, as they're just a virus from like space, pretty much alien, I'd say, right?
Yeah, got you. That's interesting. So in one universe it's aliens, and the other one is Jesus.
Yeah, bro.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Araki be on something when he be writing this stuff, bro.
True, he's on something. Like, dang, we got Jesus in here. I didn't know Rocky was Christian.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to compare between them. I feel like we've kind of gone pretty in depth on both of them, how they compare, and their similarities and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd say like we pretty much covered like all grounds. I think the only thing I can really think about to talk about is when it comes to the like, so for example, JoJo has stand like stats, right? They have like this, let's say like an alphabetical tiering of, okay, this is how strong this is, how fast this is, this and that. And also here's the description down below. I was wondering if JJK has something like similar to that, like from the author.
No, not quite. A lot of the stuff is sort of, because a lot of it's situational. A lot of like curse techniques and like curse energy stuff depends on the user and how they implement it themselves. I will say that like some of the students have their own little stat line that like basically compare. It basically assesses them as Jujutsu Sorcerer students, like their knowledge, their cursed energy control, their physical stats. But to specifically compare like power system stats to power system stats, Gege has not come out publicly with anything surrounding that as of their time of recording this video. That could change, but it hasn't. Nothing like that has come out yet.
Okay, I mean, all I can say is props to like the author for going the extra mile to power scale Gojo. He went to the university, bro. I saw that shit. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's the closest thing. He got like actual like real scientists to break down how Gojo's abilities could work. It'd be like, yeah, bro, somebody's got to be able to explain this. Like, because he obviously has his inverse explanation that Gojo tells to everybody, but he wanted to, I'm assuming he wanted to get like a different type of like a more real verse applicable somehow version of the imaginary infinity, as funny as that sounds.
Yep.
So yeah,
I just wonder how that man's like, how's Gojo creating negative apples, bro? Like, what? What's that even like?
yeah, crazy stuff.
But yeah, I think that's definitely all my grounds covered, you know, in terms of stands versus cursed energy. Just a great discussion.
For sure, 100%. Always good to talk about. I think it's an interesting topic, considering that these two power systems are kind of like, I've heard them cited in like the top tiers of like anime power systems. So it's cool to kind of talk about them in comparison, how they compare, how they contrast each other, things like that.
Yeah, same here. I've heard about it too, especially mainly Gojo. There's a lot of Gojo stands out there. Like, bro, use Infinity, bro. All right. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, just hope y'all enjoyed the video. Broken Ronin, would you like to plug yourself in once more?
Yeah, man. If you guys want to see some JJK content from me, go over to my channel, subscribe, hit the bell, do all that good stuff. I'd be making a lot of JJK shit. If you're one of the few, or if you're one of the many, I should say, that feel confused about certain JJK concepts, I do have a series where I explain a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen abilities, techniques, and other things like that I know a lot of people sometimes struggle to see in a digestible way. I kind of break it down and I think delivered in a way that sometimes is more understandable than the manga. So, there's that.
All right, I'd just like to leave off on a final JJK question for not only Broken Ronin, but for the audience. All right?
All right.
I better hear some spicy shit, okay?
All right.
What's your type of woman?
That's crazy. Listen, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this.
All right.
Me and Yuji are locked in for real. If I'd be going in the same flashback as Todo's. If Yuji said that to me and him, we twinning for real.
Yep.
Me and him one in the same.
We're bros here. We're all one in the same. Oh my.
Yeah.
That was
twinning up.
Twinning up, bro. That was one of the best bromances ever. Oh my god. All right, y'all have a good one. I'll see y'all later. Peace out.
Hey, good job.
Broken Ronin here. Debate builds difference by map mode.
My bad.
You guys are killing it. If you're a freaking Metal Gear in your eyes, Metal Gear. Yeah, it's a lawyer. Summer about. Keeping that in the video. Yeah.